Okay, so Lindsay asks, what is the link between certain charged thoughts and the corresponding physical sensations slash emotions in the body? I find that when my body feels light and free, my thoughts can come and go, and are seen as impermanence. Why do some thoughts create that physical charge? Why are different physical sensations seemingly located in different parts of the body, i.e., I feel some emotions in my arms? So I'm just keeping an eye on the baby monitor here, so I might have to run. So what seems to give rise to the identification or the felt to be real sense of a separate subject is it's kind of like a combination of multiple different sensations all bundled up in a and given context by this subject object thought function. So there's a cluster of sensations that are kind of given their shape and locality and dimensions and importance by a mental map, like a spatial map that's projected onto or augmented onto sensory experience. And that spatial map has a physical vessel, or a limited and separate subjective position in the center of experience that localizes itself apart from the totality of experience. And that subjective position seems to relate out to an objective experience that's apart from itself, that's at a distance from itself and is independent of that subjective position. So my life seen as the circumstances in the external world, how I relate to those circumstances from this inherent viewpoint that's here. So it begins with the sense that there is something inherent here that exists, and it feels like it exists because it can relate to its own existence, or it can relate to experience as something here that's in it. So it's a very fundamental and subtle duality that's I described it recently like a reflection. So you've got the reflected and the reflection, the subject and the object. So what is, and then the interpretation of what is at a very basic and fundamental level. So this sense of inherent existence as something then gives rise to the experience, or they co-arise the experience and the experiencer, the reflection and the reflected. The subject and the object dependently co-arise together. And then you've got this dichotomy between two poles. You have this duality, or this relationship between one thing and another thing. So this is strengthened by the sense experience. Or the sense experience isn't really a sense experience until this fundamental duality is appears, let's say. And that's kind of what gives rise to experience. The sense of there being something here, an experiencer, a subject. So this, what I'm describing here is essentially the reflective quality of thought or thinking. It has like an ability to seemingly suggest a split somewhere in this, to kind of seem to replicate itself into two, or mimic the unknowable by reflecting it in a way that gives rise to the experience of knowing. So the knowingness that is the fundamental essence of experience is suggests in it the presence of a knower, or the necessity of there having to be a knower and then the known. So this knowing quality, this reflective capacity of the thought experience, or the thought space, goes on to start infinitely reflecting itself between these two poles, the reflected and the reflection. And this creates a complexity in that relationship, which gives rise to what we understand as the experience of self, or the experience of an objective world, assuming this subjective point of view. The knowing of an experience assuming the subjective position of the one knowing, wherever that might be. This becomes localized in this sense experience as a center point, so like a centrally important point where that knower is assumed to be, that then continues to strengthen its own assumed existence and belief in itself by relating to objective experience and knowing things seemingly as something in it, seemingly as something separate from it. So in doing that, it claims the sense phenomenon as a personal experience, as something that all relates and refers back to me, this central character, this central position within it. And how I describe that is a kind of augmented reality. The reflective capacity of mind interprets and reflects through this dichotomy the sense appearance, the sensory experience, whatever this is, which is non-dual in nature. Even the thoughts, non-dual in nature. So there's nothing but non-dual nature, but this split, this reflection in there creates a constantly moving, constantly working, constantly reflecting and interpreting of the unknowable, non-dual nature. And it can only do that by localizing itself as something looking at it, so as something within it, as a subject within a separate objective experience. So this augmentation is like a spatial map that has relative value. The value is relative always from the relative position of the subject within this. So it augments physical limitations onto the sense experience. So in the scene, it gives particular value to the limits of this physical body. In the herd, it gives particular value to the apparent one in the centre hearing it, and then how that relates to the herd as being distinct, separate sounds. Same with the sight, distinct, separate objects with their own inherent value. It localizes the physical sensation to a center point. And it suggests continually that this center point is the inherent and always here me, the inherent and always here subject that is a constant throughout experience. That in doing that, it assumes that sense phenomenon, the apparent world, is a constant and inherently existing object out with its own perceptive faculties. So this has the effect of creating this kind of energetic illusion, where this subject-object function, this claiming of the sense phenomenon as a personal experience, generates this separate entity moving through time. And this separate entity moving through time doesn't exist or exists in the misperception of, or the misunderstanding of, object permanence. It doesn't understand impermanence, so it constructs this false world where I'm a permanent object relating and referring to other permanent objects out there. The subjective view here is inherent and always there, and the external world out there is inherent and always there, and I'm moving through it as an independent entity. The same goes for the mind. The subject and mind, the thinker, is inherently here all the time, and its objective thought objects are real. So it tries to claim sense experience, part of that sense experience being emotions. into a permanent and inherently existing entity that, because it doesn't know impermanence, it can't understand death. Death is its limit. It doesn't seem right to that entity, because the entity exists in a world of subject and object, permanent existence. So it has this effect of claiming the sense phenomenon and the emotions, and like strangely almost like boxing them into a package called me that has a weird effect of like trying to retain aspects of experience as if they're not transient and ephemeral. And it does that by resisting certain aspects of experience and chasing other aspects of experience, desire and aversion. So for me, this created a kind of energetic dysphoria that underpinned, or was like an undertow in the background of this experience. It didn't feel quite right, and gave rise to psychological suffering. And the energetic signature of this, which is a bundle of thoughts and sensations, has a distinctive feeling tone to it that morphs and changes, but there's a distinctive feeling tone in it that feels like me, feels like what I am. And if I was to describe that tone, it would be something like dissatisfaction, fear, confusion, resistance. Struggle for control, something like that. So the thoughts seem to be like bundled up with the emotions into a package called me. So it's like a congealing of experience into this apparent center point, this apparent ownership in the center of experience. And that's kind of what gives all of this a relationship. The subject called me relating to the object called my life and my experience. So with inquiry, we begin to investigate that and then untangle that relationship, break it all apart, and by looking clearly at these assumptions, what is being assumed, what is being believed by default, which gives rise to the experience of separation. A big part of this is an emotion, and I think a key in this is that feeling tone of the self, or what people describe as selfing. When that arises in experience, there can be a recognition of that. Then we use that opportunity to investigate what's going on here. How is this dysphoric experience of me being generated? The main thing being thought, but the tricky part is that what we experience as thoughts, we believe, or that self believes to be inherent reality. So it doesn't seem like a thought. So we experience a strong emotion, it feels like my emotion. It feels like it has to be there, that it's immediately claimed or inherently claimed as my emotion. And that I need to do something about it to get away from this feeling, to fix it, to avoid it in the future, to make myself feel better, because I'm resisting that sensation, because I'm assuming that what I am shouldn't be experiencing that sensation, and it needs to change because it's not acceptable. And that is a position taken as the subject that then relates to its experience as the object, the experience, the sensation being emotion, and holds that belief, that view, that position that I shouldn't be experiencing this. That this is either good or bad, should be or shouldn't be. In that we try and control something that, one, you can't even know, is too mysterious, too free, and two, it's not impossible for something illusory to control its own, the substance of its own illusion, if that makes sense. So the key is in thought and untangling the thoughts from the sense experience. And I suppose we begin this in the thought space from that point of view of the thinker that's constantly running based on this assumption, this belief that I am the subject in my mind relating to my thought experience. That's the first opening. And with that, then, once that mental narrative has lost its reality, it kind of falls away. The way thought is augmented onto physical, three-dimensional reality can come into clarity. And that's what I would describe as the building blocks upon which this psychological self is propped upon. When we remove those structures, then the self has nowhere to stand anymore, and the non-dual nature of this, the mysterious and completely free, liberated nature of this as what we are, can be realised clearly, and that includes everything. It includes all illusions. It is the substance of all illusions. And that freedom doesn't exclude any experience, any illusion, any sensation. So, I don't know if I answered the question there, but you can let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you next time.